No one ever questioned why the babysitter arrived early, or why she stayed late, or why the kids cried when she wasn't there. They thought that meant she cared. They didn't know she had been rehearsing this family for months, learning their routines, mapping their blind spots, waiting for the moment when no one would think to look at her twice. By the time the first body was discovered, she had already won. Subscribe to this channel now. Let's find out how this chilling true crime story ends. She started working for the Parker family on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic Tuesday, not a memorable one. Just a normal weekday in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood where people waved at each other out of habit and trusted faces more than instincts. Her name was Lena Whitmore. That was the name she gave them. She was 24 years old, soft-spoken, thin in a way that suggested she forgot to eat more often than she tried to diet. Her hair was always tied back neatly, never messy, never expressive. Her clothes were modest, practical, clean. She didn't dress like someone trying to be noticed. That was the first mistake. Emily Parker met her at the front door, balancing a phone between her shoulder and ear while signing a permission slip for her daughter at the kitchen counter. "I'm so sorry," Emily said, covering the phone. "Mornings are chaos." Lena smiled gently, not wide, not eager, just enough. "That's okay," she said. "I'm used to it." She had a calm voice, the kind that slowed the room down without trying. Emily liked that immediately. Her husband, Mark Parker, noticed something else. Lena didn't look around the house the way most new babysitters did. She didn't stare at family photos, didn't ask where things were kept, didn't fidget. She stood still, listened, absorbed. That should have bothered him, but it didn't, because nothing about Lena felt threatening. She passed the background check, provided references, spoke warmly about her previous families. She said she loved children because they're honest in ways adults aren't. Emily wrote that sentence down later in her planner. She thought it was beautiful. 6-year-old Milo Parker stopped crying the first afternoon Lena stayed with him. Just stopped. Emily noticed it when she came home from work and found Milo sitting quietly at the table coloring, his backpack neatly hung by the door. "That never happens," Emily said, laughing in disbelief. Lena shrugged. "He just needed someone to listen." Milo didn't talk much after that, but he started drawing things he had never drawn before. Rooms, doors, stick figures standing apart from one another. Emily assumed it was school stress. Lena never corrected her. 4-year-old Ava followed Lena everywhere. She held on to the hem of her sweater, cried when Lena left, asked if Lena would come back tomorrow. Lena always said yes, even when she wasn't scheduled, especially then. That was the genius of it. Lena didn't ask for more hours. She created problems she could solve. Emily mentioned once, casually, that she was overwhelmed. The next week, Lena offered to stay late, unpaid. Mark forgot his lunch one morning. Lena showed up at his office with it, saying Ava had insisted. "She wouldn't stop crying until we brought it," Lena said, embarrassed. Mark thanked her. Too much. Emily didn't notice how often Lena's name came up in conversation. How did Lena handle it? What did Lena say? "Lena thinks maybe Milo needs more structure." The house slowly began to orient itself around Lena's presence. And no one realized that was exactly what she wanted. That's how she did it. Not big lies, not dramatic ones. Tiny adjustments to reality. She told Emily that Mark had come home late and seemed irritated when she asked about dinner. She told Mark that Emily had cried while folding laundry. Neither of those things had happened, but both could have, so neither questioned it. Lena never accused. She only suggested. "I might be wrong," she'd say. "I just thought you should know." Emily started watching Mark more closely. Mark started choosing his words more carefully. They didn't fight. They just drifted. And Lena was always there to catch the pieces, because she never volunteered it. She spoke vaguely, moved around a lot. Family issues, nothing dramatic. When Emily once asked if Lena had siblings, she paused, just long enough. "I did," she said. "A long time ago." Emily didn't press. She never noticed the way Lena's eyes didn't soften when she spoke about children. They sharpened. It happened 6 weeks in. Emily and Mark had gone out for their anniversary. Dinner, wine, a fragile attempt at reconnecting. They came home late. The house was dark. Too dark. Emily flipped the light switch and froze. Milo was sitting on the couch, awake, silent. Ava was asleep beside him, her face streaked with dried tears. "Why are you up?" Emily whispered, rushing over. Milo didn't answer. Lena emerged from the hallway slowly, like she had been waiting. "I didn't want to wake her," she said quietly. "He had a bad dream." Mark noticed something then. Milo flinched when Lena spoke, just slightly, but it was there. Emily didn't see it. She hugged Lena instead. "Thank you," she said. "We don't know what we'd do without you." Lena held her a second too long. That night, after Lena left, Mark checked the baby monitor. It had been turned off. He told himself it was a mistake. He didn't mention it. This was when Lena realized she didn't just have access. She had authority. The children trusted her. The parents deferred to her. The house responded to her presence. She began to rearrange things subtly. Locks, schedules, who knew what. She learned when Mark showered, when Emily slept deepest, when the neighbors left for work. She wasn't improvising. She was executing. And the Parker family never saw it coming. They didn't know she had been watching them long before she ever rang the doorbell. They didn't know the references were real, but borrowed. They didn't know the name Lena Whitmore belonged to a girl who had died 5 years earlier. And they definitely didn't know that by the time they would start asking the right questions. Someone in that house would already be dead. By the 7th week, Lena no longer knocked. She let herself in. Emily had given her a spare key without thinking about it. It happened one rushed morning when Ava refused to put on her shoes, and Milo had already missed the bus. "Just in case," Emily had said, dropping the key into Lena's palm. "In case of what?" Lena had asked softly. Emily laughed. "Life." Lena nodded. She liked that word. It wasn't dramatic. Nothing that could be pointed to in a single moment. Just small shifts. Mark would come home and find dinner already made. Not by Emily, but by Lena. She never said she cooked it. She just did. Emily would thank her. Mark would sit down and eat food he hadn't been asked about, at a table he hadn't been part of preparing. "You don't have to do all this," he told Lena one evening. She smiled politely. "I don't mind," Emily added, without looking up from her phone. "She's been such a lifesaver." That word again. Mark noticed that Lena always positioned herself between him and the kids. Not physically, socially. If Ava scraped her knee, she ran to Lena first. If Milo had a question, he looked at Lena before answering. Mark told himself it was temporary. Kids attached easily. They'd grow out of it. It happened on a Thursday. Emily came home early. She heard voices upstairs, raised. Milo was crying. Emily dropped her bag and ran. She found Milo in his room, sitting on the floor, shaking. Lena stood near the door. "What happened?" Emily asked sharply. Lena turned slowly, startled. "He had a meltdown." Milo shook his head. "No," Lena interrupted gently. "Milo, we talked about telling the truth." Emily froze. "What do you mean?" Lena hesitated, looked uncomfortable, like she didn't want to say it. "He said something concerning," Lena said carefully, "about hurting Ava." Emily's stomach dropped. "That's not true," Milo sobbed. "I didn't say that." Emily knelt beside him, holding his face. "Milo, did you say something like that?" He shook his head violently. "She said I did. She said Daddy gets mad when I lie." Emily stood up slowly. Lena's face changed. Just for a second. Then she softened it. "I might have misunderstood," she said quickly. "He was very upset." Emily nodded, uneasy. Mark came home later that night to a quiet house and a silence that felt heavier than usual. No one told him what had happened. But something had. Not intentionally. It just happened. They folded laundry together, prepped lunches, waited for the kids to fall asleep. Emily talked about stress, work, marriage, feeling unseen. Lena listened, never interrupted, never judged, just nodded. "You deserve support," Lena said once. Emily felt tears well up unexpectedly. Mark hadn't said that in years. Mark noticed it one morning, the shed in the backyard. It had always been there, old, wooden, mostly empty. Now it had a new padlock. He stood at the window, coffee growing cold in his hands. "Did you lock the shed?" he asked Emily. She frowned. "No. Did you?" Mark shook his head. They both turned toward Lena, who was helping Ava with her jacket. "Oh," Lena said lightly. "I asked Mark if I could store some things there." Mark blinked. "You did?" She smiled apologetically. "I might have mentioned it in passing. You were distracted." Emily shrugged. "It's fine. It's just a shed." Mark felt stupid for questioning it. That was how Lena liked it. Mrs. Calder lived 2 houses down. She'd been there 30 years. She noticed everything. She noticed when Lena started coming and going, even when she wasn't scheduled. She noticed how the kids stopped playing outside. She noticed how Emily stopped waving. And she noticed the smell. Not strong, just wrong, sweet, metallic, like something old trying to stay hidden. She mentioned it casually to Mark one afternoon while collecting mail. "You got something dead back there?" she joked. Mark laughed too quickly. "Probably raccoons." Mrs. Calder nodded slowly, but she didn't laugh. It was the first real argument in months. Emily accused him of being distant. Mark accused her of shutting him out. Lena sat at the kitchen table, quiet, like she didn't belong there. "You don't listen anymore," Emily said, tears in her eyes. "I listen," Mark snapped. "I just don't talk through a third person." Emily froze. Lena stood up immediately. "I should go." "No," Emily said quickly. "Stay." Mark looked at her. "That's exactly the problem." He slept on the couch that night. At some point, after midnight, he woke to the sound of footsteps. Lena stood in the hallway. "I made you tea," she whispered. Mark stared at her. Something cold settled in his chest. "I didn't ask for tea," he said. She didn't move. "I just wanted to help," she replied softly. Mark sat up. "Please don't come in here like that again." Lena's face changed. Not anger, something else. Calculation. "I understand," she said. She turned and walked away. Mark didn't sleep after that. Police would later determine it had been there for weeks, hidden, preserved, sealed off. They would say it was deliberate. They would say someone had taken great care to make sure it wasn't discovered too soon. They would say the timing mattered. Christmas mattered. Because families don't question joy. They don't look behind sheds when presents are being opened. They don't listen to instincts when children are laughing. And Lena had planned it that way. On Christmas Eve, Lena stayed late, much later than usual. Emily didn't question it. She was exhausted. Mark went to bed early. He locked the back door. Or at least, he thought he did. At 2:17 a.m., the shed door opened and closed. No one heard it. At 8:43 a.m. Christmas morning, Ava screamed. Not in joy, in terror. Mark ran first, then Emily. They followed Ava into the backyard, past the tree, past the frost-covered grass, past the shed. The door was open. Inside was something no family should ever find. And Lena was nowhere to be seen. The first police car arrived at 9:02 a.m. By then, Emily was sitting on the kitchen floor, her back against the cabinet. Ava pressed into her chest so tightly, it looked like she was trying to disappear inside her mother. Mark stood at the back door. He hadn't moved since he stepped away from the shed. He couldn't. Because once you see something like that, your body forgets how to do normal things. The officer didn't rush. That would come later. For now, he asked the question that always comes first. "Who found it?" Ava whimpered. Emily answered instead. My daughter. She thought it was a game. The officer nodded, eyes already scanning the yard. Is anyone missing? Mark opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Emily shook her head. No, no one we know. That was true, and it wasn't. They photographed it before they touched anything. The padlock was still hanging from the latch, snapped open. Not broken. Opened. Inside, wrapped in plastic and tarp, was a man, mid-30s, male, dead long enough that the cold had done some of the work for him, but not long enough to erase him. One officer turned away, another swallowed hard. The detective on scene, Detective Marissa Holt, didn't react at all. She crouched, looked, noted. This wasn't a crime of panic. It was a crime of patience. They asked about Lena within the first 10 minutes. Who was the woman staying here? Emily blinked. Staying? The babysitter, the officer clarified. Neighbors say she's here almost daily. Mark's jaw tightened. She had a key, he said. She let herself in. Detective Holt looked up. How long? Mark hesitated. 2 months, maybe longer. And where is she now? Emily looked around the kitchen like Lena might still be there. I don't know. The detective made a note. That bothered Holt. The kitchen counters were wiped, the sink empty, the trash taken out. No signs of a struggle, no signs of panic, just absence. Who was home last night? She asked. Emily answered. All of us, and Lena. Mark's head snapped toward her. She stayed late, Emily said quickly. You were asleep. Mark said nothing. That silence would matter later. They interviewed Milo first, gently, away from the chaos. He sat on the edge of his bed, legs swinging, eyes fixed on the carpet. Can you tell me about the lady who watches you? Holt asked softly. Milo nodded. What's her name? He hesitated. Lena, he said. But sometimes she says different names. Holt's pen paused. Different how? Milo shrugged. Like when she talks on the phone. What does she talk about? He thought. She tells people we're good kids. She says Daddy doesn't notice things. Holt looked up. What things? Milo shook his head. I'm not supposed to say. By noon, the narrative had already started forming. And it wasn't Lena. It was Mark. Because the shed was on his property. Because the lock was new. Because the body had been hidden deliberately. Because statistically, men hide bodies. Fathers know the backyard. Emily didn't understand what was happening until Holt asked, When did your husband last use the shed? Mark stared at her. I don't, he said. I didn't even know it was locked. Holt didn't accuse. She didn't need to. The implication sat there between them. Emily felt it like pressure. Mrs. Calder had been waiting. I told him something smelled wrong, she said, arms folded. I joked about it. Mark didn't look at her. I assumed he handled it. Emily turned slowly. What do you mean, handled it? Mrs. Calder hesitated. Well, he's the man of the house. That sentence did more damage than any evidence. By evening, they had one. Samuel Price. Missing for 8 months. Last seen leaving a bus station 2 towns over. No known connection to the Parkers. No criminal history. No reason to be there. Which meant someone had brought him there, and someone had kept him there. They found it when they cataloged the shed. Inside Mark's tool chest. A second key, not to the house, to the padlock. Holt held it up. Who does this belong to? Mark shook his head. Not me. Emily stared at it. Then something clicked. She carried keys, Emily said suddenly. Lena, she always had keys, more than she needed. Holt's eyes sharpened. Lena's phone number went straight to voicemail. Her references didn't answer. The address on her paperwork led to an empty apartment. Not recently emptied. Abandoned. Her name didn't exist in any local records. Neither did her social security number. Holt exhaled slowly. This woman was never who she said she was. Emily felt sick, because she already knew that, even after suspicion shifted, even after the key was bagged, even after Lena became a person of interest. Mark was still the man who lived with the body, who slept 30 feet away from it, who never looked in the shed. The internet would later say that meant something. Emily didn't know what to think. She just knew that the house didn't feel like hers anymore. It came that night. Emily's phone buzzed. Unknown number. A photo. The backyard. Taken from above. A caption beneath it. "You trusted me." Emily screamed. Detective Marissa Holt didn't sleep that night. She sat in her car 2 blocks away from the Parker house, engine off, notebook open, reading the same details over and over until they stopped looking like coincidence. Because coincidence doesn't leave spare keys. Coincidence doesn't study families. Coincidence doesn't wait for Christmas. That was the first mistake everyone made. Emily's phone buzzed again at 1:34 a.m. Another photo. This one was older. Ava on the swing set. Milo walking home from school. Mark in the driveway, keys in hand. Each image had been taken from a distance, from the street, from across the park, from places no one ever looks. The caption was short. "I kept them safe." Emily's hand shook so badly she dropped the phone. Holt realized that around dawn. If Lena wanted to disappear, she already had. She'd been using false names, false addresses, burner phones. She could have vanished the moment the shed was opened. Instead, she stayed close enough to watch, to remind them she still existed. That meant Lena wanted something else, not escape, control. The missing man had worked night shifts at a warehouse near the interstate. Low profile, no family nearby, no one who would push hard enough. But that wasn't the connection. The connection was Emily. Samuel Price had once dated Emily's younger sister. Briefly. Years ago. The relationship ended quietly. The sister died 6 months later. Overdose. Officially accidental. Unofficially unresolved. Holt stared at the file. "Jesus," she muttered. Emily had never spoken about her much. Not because she didn't care, because caring hurt too much. Her sister Rachel had been unstable, brilliant, intense, protective to the point of obsession. She'd struggled, she'd spiraled. And when she died, Emily had packed the grief away and kept moving. Lena had unpacked it, piece by piece. Holt found it buried in county records. A juvenile intake report. A girl, age 14. Name, Rachel Whitmore. Custody dispute. Mental health concerns. Younger sister removed from the home. Emily's stomach turned when Holt showed her the document. "Whitmore?" she whispered. Holt nodded. Lena Whitmore wasn't her real name. It was her sister's. Emily felt like the room tilted. Not Lena. Eliza Whitmore. Age 24. Former foster placements. Multiple relocations. No permanent address since 17. Her sister Rachel had been the only constant. Rachel had dated Samuel. Rachel had spiraled. Rachel had died. And Eliza had been watching ever since. They were the setting. The audience. Eliza didn't want Samuel dead. She wanted him remembered. She wanted him to exist in a place that would force attention. A family home, a holiday, a moment no one could ignore. She wanted Emily to look at the body and remember Rachel. And she wanted Mark blamed first. Because men like Mark always were. Invisible, trusted, unquestioned. Eliza didn't dominate. She embedded. She learned how Emily loved, how Mark withdrew, how the children listened. She didn't need violence inside the house. She needed distance. That's why Samuel was already dead when he arrived. That's why the shed was sealed. That's why the lock was neat. The crime wasn't the murder. The crime was the placement. The call came at 11:18 p.m. the following night. Holt answered. "You figured it out," Eliza said calmly. No distortion, no panic, just certainty. "Where are you?" Holt asked. Eliza smiled. Holt could hear it. Close enough to watch you look for me. Why the Parkers? Silence. Then, because Emily survived. Holt didn't interrupt. She got to grow up, Eliza continued. She got a family. She got a life. Rachel got buried. You didn't have to do this, Holt said. I did, Eliza replied. You just didn't see it yet. The line went dead. Too late for the damage. His name had already traveled. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Parents pulled their kids back. Emily tried to apologize. There were no words big enough. The house felt poisoned, not haunted, judged. Eliza was arrested 3 days later. Not at the Parker house, at Rachel's grave. She was kneeling, cleaning it. She didn't resist. She only said one thing as Holt cuffed her. I needed someone to remember her. Was Eliza a monster or a witness who refused to be quiet? She didn't deny what she'd done. She didn't apologize. She only asked one thing during interrogation. Did Emily look at him? Holt didn't answer. She didn't need to. Eliza already knew. Eliza Whitmore's arrest didn't bring relief. It brought noise. By the next morning, the Parker house was surrounded by satellite trucks and people who didn't know their names but felt entitled to their pain. Did you know the babysitter? Do you feel responsible? Were there warning signs? Emily stopped opening the curtains. Mark stopped answering his phone. The children were sent to stay with Emily's parents, where they slept with the lights on and asked questions no one knew how to answer. And Eliza, now back to being called by her real name, sat in a holding cell, calm, expressionless, like someone who had finished the only task that ever mattered to her. There were two stories competing for oxygen. Story 1. A dangerous woman infiltrated a family, manipulated children, and hid a corpse on private property. Story 2. A forgotten sister exposed a system that failed her, using the only language she believed anyone would hear. Neither story was wrong, and that made everything worse. Prosecutors charged Eliza with second-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, identity fraud, endangering minors. The defense didn't deny the placement of the body. They didn't deny the deception. They argued intent. She didn't kill him in that shed, the defense attorney said during pretrial motions. Yeah, she brought him there so the truth could no longer be buried. The judge didn't like that framing. The public loved it. She hadn't wanted to. But the prosecution needed her. They needed the jury to see the damage. Emily sat on the stand in a borrowed blazer, hands folded so tightly her knuckles were white. She was kind, Emily said. She helped us. She made me feel like I wasn't failing. Her voice cracked. And that's what makes it worse. The defense asked gently, Did Eliza ever threaten you? No. Did she ever raise her voice? No. Did she ever harm your children? Emily hesitated. No. The courtroom shifted. He didn't cry. He didn't soften his words. She made me feel invisible in my own house, he said. Like I didn't belong there. The defense asked, Did you suspect her? Yes, Mark said quietly, but I didn't act fast enough. That admission followed him for the rest of the trial. The judge refused. But drawings Milo had made during therapy were entered into evidence. Rooms, doors, figures standing outside sheds. No one commented on them. No one needed to. Not during testimony. During sentencing. She stood, hands cuffed, posture straight. I didn't hate the Parkers, she said calmly. I needed a family that wouldn't disappear when the truth came out. She looked at Emily. I never touched your children. I never would have. She looked at the judge. You would have ignored Samuel Price if he'd stayed buried. Silence filled the room. That silence became the loudest part of the trial. Guilty, on all major counts. The sentence, 28 years. No possibility of parole until year 20. Eliza nodded when it was read, as if she'd expected nothing else, as if the outcome had never mattered. The Parkers moved. new city, new school district, new routines, but the house followed them. Not physically, psychologically. Mark and Emily didn't divorce, but they didn't return to who they'd been. Trust, once rerouted, doesn't always find its way back. Emily volunteered with a foster advocacy group. Mark stopped watching the news. The kids grew older. They remembered Lena. They remembered the calm. That confused them most. The city ordered it. Hazard removal. Mark watched it collapse. He didn't feel closure, just absence. Too many. Some called her evil. Some called her brave. She didn't respond to any of them, except one, a letter from Emily. It was short. I remember Rachel now. I didn't know how much I'd buried. Eliza read it twice, then folded it carefully. That was the last thing she ever kept. The babysitter wasn't a monster hiding in the dark. She was a woman who learned how to disappear so well that no one noticed when she stepped into someone else's life. And by the time they realized who was really in control, she had already written the ending. Years passed. That was the part no one warned them about. The headlines stopped. The court transcripts were archived. Eliza Whitmore became a name people half remembered when similar stories surfaced. But for the people who had lived inside it, time didn't erase anything. It just made the edges sharper. She told herself it was practical, that the kids were older now, that her schedule had changed. But the truth lived deeper than that. She couldn't watch a stranger sit on her couch without wondering what they were memorizing. She couldn't hear someone say, "I've got it," without flinching. Trust had become something that required proof, and proof was never enough. Not accused, not guilty, just wrong. Wrong for ignoring his instincts. Wrong for staying silent. Wrong for thinking discomfort was something to be tolerated instead of questioned. He didn't speak about Eliza, but sometimes, when the house was quiet, he replayed moments in his head. The tea, the hallway, the lock. He understood now that danger doesn't announce itself loudly. It waits until you're tired. Milo grew up cautious, observant in ways other kids weren't. He studied people, listened more than he spoke. Therapists called it hypervigilance. Milo called it survival. Ava remembered Lena as gentle. That scared Emily the most. "She braided my hair," Ava once said. "She sang when I cried." Emily didn't correct her. She didn't know how. New owners, fresh paint, a renovated backyard. The shed was gone, but the space remained. People asked about it. The answer was always vague. Old structure, safety issue. That was true, just not complete. She taught part-time at a criminal justice program. She told her students the same thing every semester. The most dangerous people don't look dangerous. They look useful. She never mentioned Eliza by name. She didn't have to. Was Eliza a villain? A victim? A witness who forced the world to look where it never wanted to? The court had answered one version of that question. History would argue about the rest. They thought the story was about the body, about the shed, about the crime. It wasn't. It was about access, about how easily someone can step into your life when you're overwhelmed, about how trust is often given to the quietest voice in the room, and about how, sometimes, the person you never question is the one who's already decided how it ends. You thought she was the babysitter. She wasn't. She was the only one who planned for what would happen when everyone else stopped looking. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 10,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe to this channel now, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent.